Hey everybody, welcome to EverydayFI. I'm your host, Meghan Combs, and I'm here to say that you do not need a $1 million book deal or a famous blog to reach financial independence. By exploring the lives of everyday people pursuing FI, I'll show you how to forge your own path to financial freedom the everyday way. If you'd like to support the show, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast for ad-free and bonus content. Also, if you'd like to buy some merch, some t-shirts, mugs, stickers, totes, anything, you can go to TeePublic and find me there. I'll put the link in the show notes. So today is EverydayFi's 100th episode. Did you ever think that we would get here? I didn't sometimes. There are so many things to reflect on, the stories we've heard, the evolution of the show, all of that. And I want to talk about all of it. But for people who are new to the show, I want to introduce myself just a little bit and how I found the FIRE movement. When I first heard about FIRE, I was in my early to mid 20s in New York City. I was reading an article. I can't place where, when I read it. I can't exactly place the year, maybe around 2013, 2014, something like that. But I was reading an article and some dude with a mustache, or who was called Mustache, I don't know, told me that his family lived on $25,000 a year. And I could too if I wanted to reach financial independence. I rolled my eyes and was like, yeah, right. Okay. In New York City, my rent is $1,000 a month and I only make $25,000 a year. So how am I supposed to save 25 and live on 25,000? That doesn't make any sense. And I can't save half my income because half my income is going to rent. But I didn't look into the FIRE movement because of this. I completely wrote off the whole thing and just rolled my eyes at it and didn't really revisit it again for 6 to 7 years. And all I can think about is the gains that I missed out on because I also wasn't investing at the time. I didn't have a grown-up job, so to speak. I was working in restaurants. I worked part-time in museums. I was volunteering in museums, doing internships. Part of that time, I was getting a master's degree. So there was no saving. There was paying off credit card debt, and that was it. And so I didn't start saving for retirement until about 28, 29, when I got a real big girl job at a gallery. So I do want to qualify this that I love Mr. Money Mustache now, who, by the way, is who I was referring to. He has great ideas and he really does connect to a lot of other people. But for me, his story of drastic life editing did not appeal to me, especially at 25 when I was already living on basically nothing and hated it. It definitely put me off from the movement. And a lot of those older FIRE stories are like that, where it's ultra frugal people doing crazy things so they can quit their jobs at 30. And I say crazy not in a derogatory way, but just I think the movement has changed since then. It's evolved to understand that you don't really want to live in a super low cost of living area that might be dangerous and have mold or roaches for the rest of your life just so that you can quit your job at 30. You also might not want to be a full-time nomad and travel all the time or go live in Thailand and that's how you retire at 30. Some people just don't want to do that. The outliers definitely want to do that, but for the everyday folks, we want to live in a comfortable home. We want to have families, whether that family is kids or pets or your chosen friend family, whatever it is. A lot of us are not like these outliers. And I think that there is a way to connect to the FI movement that doesn't involve doing things that are drastic, cutting your expenses so drastically that you have to live on ramen and beans. I wanted to show those other kinds of stories. I wanted to show what my people who are pilots, people who are nurses, people who are truck drivers reaching financial independence. So I started the EverydayFI podcast and I interview these everyday people in our community. I find them at Camp Fi's, I find them in Choose Fi local groups, I find them in the Choose Fi Facebook groups. Some people write into the show to be on. I will take everybody in the community as long as it's a legitimate request. I will take the people and hear their story. And sometimes I don't relate personally to the story, or they made choices that I personally wouldn't make, but maybe one of you guys out there listening really connects with that person. And that's what the point of Everyday Fi is. Okay, so I've learned a ton of lessons from recording the show, and I am not going to list every single one of them. I'll just list about 6, and I'll go through these relatively quickly because I also want to get to how the show is going to change actually in the next coming months and probably for good. Don't worry, the show's still going to be here. It's just going to change a little bit. But yeah, let me talk about the lessons that I've learned. So, number 1 is that I could identify and relate to every single one of my guests in some way, whether it was a big way or it was a small way. There was always something that I could connect to in their stories. And I think the lesson there is that we're all more alike than we think. And that's a great thing because it fosters connection. It grows compassion for other people, especially in a world where it's really easy to get mad at strangers on the internet or people on the road. If you hear the stories of people who could live in your own hometown, then maybe that will open people's minds a little bit more to understanding and kindness and compassion for other people's journeys and the decisions that they made once you get the context. When you look at some of the Choose FI Facebook posts, all you see is text on a screen. And when I look at their responses to some of those posts, it's very judgmental sounding. And that could also be my own perception because, again, the responses are also just text on the screen. You get no intonation, you get no emotion behind the words, you get no context because you can only write a couple paragraphs. Whereas an hour or 2 hour long interview with somebody where you're really diving into who they are, what their past was, how they found the FI movement, what their current challenges are, what their current wins are, and some advice they can give the community, which is the outline of my show, you can really connect to that person and understand the choices that they made. And I think that eliminates or at least reduces the judgment that can sometimes happen in this community. And that is another effort that I am trying to put out there, is that I have noticed a lot of judgment from people about some of the choices that people make. And I just think that's not right. I don't think it's okay to judge other people. We all make the decisions that are best for us at the time with the knowledge that we had at the time. And if we didn't know something, we can't judge other people. We can't judge ourselves either. I think also having self-compassion when you listen to stories like this, I think this can also generate that self-compassion because you might see a decision that somebody else made that you also made, and then you don't feel alone in that decision. Okay, so lesson number 2, FI is deeper than money, so much deeper. It is the ability to take a step back from work because you are undergoing very intense medical treatments, either for breast cancer, which was a recent story that just dropped with Kathleen, or in my own journey with fertility treatments. Being FI or being on the path to FI allowed both of us to do that, to step away and to take a break and really hone in on our own health and really think about the life that we wanted to live. And there are also choices that are made that maybe are not 100% mathematically the most, the best decisions. Like in David Robinson's episode where he talked about walking away from a pension because he was close to suicide. He had attempted suicide multiple times and he could not stay in the military just for a pension, just because the math worked. Why would you do that? And so FI like I said, is so much deeper than just the numbers, just the money. We can say all day that it's just numbers, it's just that, it's just this, blah, blah. I don't like the word just. I wish we would stop using it. It makes it sound like we want to simplify something that is not simple. So, the third lesson, the quote unquote famous five people also have everyday stories that we may have never heard before. So, for example, Jillian Johnsrud's story when she came on, we all know her from the Retire Often podcast, and she also just put out a book about many retirements. And we barely talked about that at all in her episode. We spent 2 hours talking about her and her journey, her writing journey, her journey to financial independence, everything about what she's doing now, what she will be doing coming up. And we did talk a little bit about the Retire Often and the mini sabbaticals, but barely. And so that is something that I may want to explore going forward, is that I know I say that, oh, I want to hear from everyday people. I don't want to hear from the famous five people. But you know what? I think I do want to hear the well-known voices in our community, the story that they haven't told yet. And so if you're one of those people and you're listening to this, beware, I'm coming for you. No, I'm just kidding. But I also was able to hear Bill Yount's story from Catching Up to Fi. We barely touched on his podcast either, and we heard more about him being an emergency room doctor and his struggle of finding financial independence very late in life. And he actually just recently reached FI, which is really great. And it was even early because I think he was either 60 or 61. And congrats to Bill. That's awesome. But yeah, I love hearing those stories as well. Everybody has a unique story to how they found this movement. Okay, number 4. So I could quit my toxic job and it would be okay. I learned resilience. I learned to conquer my fear. I learned to take the leap. I learned to live life now and not tomorrow. And that is something that FI just gives to all of us. Some of the people that I talk to about this who are not familiar with it are like, well, I really love my job. I never want to quit my job. And I always tell them, well, you love your job now, but what if it changes? What if you get laid off? What if the company goes over? What if goes under? What if you get a manager that really sucks? What if you get a colleague that really sucks? What if your duties change? What if they want to move you to a state or a town that you don't want to move to? There are so many things that could change that just because you pursue financial independence doesn't mean you have to quit the job you love, but it gives you the FU money for if it does change for the worse, you can walk away. And then you have the space to find another job that's just as good as your previous job used to be. And you don't have to scramble for the next thing and worry about taking care of your family, taking care of yourself, being able to pay the bills, being able to do anything, even travel. That is what FI gives you. You don't have to be 100% financially independent to be able to do that. Just being on the path itself and having a high savings rate and having, say, a very well-stocked brokerage account and a well-stocked savings account can allow you to do that. I mean, it allowed me to do that. And my husband was able to continue working, and I was able to step away from work back in January. I'm recording this March 25th, and I stepped away January 2nd. And I do not plan on going back to corporate tech ever again. And I actually just got a job as a barista for a part-time barista position, and I'm really excited about it. It's a local coffee shop. It's down the street from me, literally 4 minutes. I wish I could walk there, but we are not in a walkable town, unfortunately. But it is 4 minutes driving, and it's such a cute little spot with all locals who go there. And they also display local artists, which is really close to my heart as a prior art historian and artist myself. And that is what FI allowed me and my family to do, is it allowed me to take a step back and to decide to do something that was slower paced. And the next step for us is going to be getting my husband to the same spot. He is a mountain climber and loves rock climbing outside, rock climbing indoors. And so he would love to do something that's in like an outdoor space for his next job, which obviously is not going to pay much. And so once we get to the coast fi, it's almost like we need another word for this because it's coast fi, but it's also like almost fi. It's like nearly there fi. It's not even quite lean fi either. It's probably, I don't know, 15 times your expenses or something like that. You guys are new to FI. Basically, what all of the things are is when you reach financial independence, it's 25 times your annual expenses. So, say your annual expenses are $80,000 a year, then your FI number would be 2 million. Of course, that's a lot of money. But then you have lean fi, which is 20 times that. And that's where you can pull out a little bit less from your accounts whenever you hit that number and maybe do a part-time job. Or if you want to go even lower than that, say you have 10 times or 15 times, then that way you can kind of balance like, okay, what kind of money do I need to be making on the side along with my FI number, which is where I'm pulling from. So for example, let's say your FI number is $80,000 a year. So it's 25 times that. That's $2 million. I already said that was the FI number for an $80,000. But say you only have 40,000 of it covered. So you have 12.5 times your annual expenses. So you can cover $40,000, but you can't cover the other 40,000. And this is given if you take 4% from your portfolio. That's where this number is coming from for the new folks. So all you need is a $40,000 a year job, or both you and your spouse get $20,000 a year jobs. That's where my husband and I are aiming for. And so once we get there, my husband will be able to quit corporate, and he can do things like he's talking about being like an adjunct professor at NC State for doing like a lab manager professorship or something like that. Just something cool where he can get back into the science of his job and help other scientists learn, but that pays less. And the cool thing too is that provides benefits. Also, my local coffee shop provides benefits if you want to go full time. They have a 401k, they have insurance, they have dental, they have paid time off. This is a coffee shop, y'all. So, I mean, even if you think, oh, I have to pay for my own insurance after I reach financial independence, like that's going to be really hard. Not necessarily. If you find something that is the kind of place that wants to treat their employees well and will pay you for it and will pay you those benefits, awesome. I feel very fortunate to have access to a place like this. And they said yes. So I was very surprised by that. Not because I don't think that I would be good, but because I know there are other people who were probably applying who might need the job more than I do, but they must have seen something in me. So I'm really excited to get started. I won't get started for another month because another thing that my FI journey allows me to do, and that allowed me to quit that toxic job and be okay, is take time to focus on fertility treatments. And I know people are probably like, well, you just got a barista job. A part-time barista job is not going to interfere with that. It's 2 to 3 shifts a week that are 6-hour shifts. So that's like minimum 12 hours, maximum 18 hours. I'm not too worried about that. It's also 4 minutes down the road from me. But tomorrow I'm going to be having surgery, which is part of the treatment process for treating the things that prevent me from getting pregnant. And if I was working a corporate job, which this corporate job followed you everywhere, because we had people all over the world who were working there, you basically were working all the time. And it was extremely stressful. And I can't imagine them, what they would say if I had to take time off for a certain amount of time for this. And yeah, I know you're supposed to be able to do this for FMLA and all that stuff, but it doesn't matter. They still side eye you for it. My boss, when I left, actually made a comment about how I was taking too much time to go to the doctor, and I didn't seem present at the job. And I was like, well, yeah, I'm going to the doctor like every week, sometimes twice a week. And so it was FI that allowed me to walk away from that job and to focus on what really mattered to me and my husband, and that's trying to have a child. And it's going to be so much more relaxing to not relaxing, but it's going to be so much easier to have no job and just be able to do this surgery, take 2 to 3 weeks and just rest. Like I don't have to do anything. I don't even have to work. I told the barista job, which is another powerful thing of FI, I can't start until after April 13th, which is exactly 3 weeks, or well, not exactly, but it's about 3 weeks from the surgical date. I said I could not start until that week. And they were okay with that. They still hired me. And that is the power of FI. Like, I didn't need this job. I just wanted something to fill my time, to give us a little bit of extra money, and to be something that might be my next chapter in life, which is maybe baristify, which is, I don't think I know anybody who's literally a baristify person. So maybe I'll just be that baristify person in the community. So that was the power of being financially independent and not having to work. The goal for me was to not work at all. When I quit my job, the plan was for me to be pregnant and just focus on the pregnancy and then have the child and be a mom. And there was no requirement for me to go and work and do anything like that during this time. And, I realized that I was capable of doing something as long as it was low key, less hours a week, and didn't follow me home like a corporate job does, like a corporate job does. And I found that because of FI, and I'm very grateful for it. Okay, so lesson number 5. FI people's backgrounds are all completely different. We aren't just one type of person anymore. The ultra frugal that came from a frugal household, that got into a high paying career right out of college and started saving right away and did everything right. This story, of course, fits some people, but most are very different from this. There are people who came from poor background, rich backgrounds, families who spent a lot of money, families who talked about money all the time, who educated their kids about money, parents who never talked about money, parents who only ever talked about saving, who never talked about investing, parents who argued about money, parents who even split up because of money, and even children whose parents died when they were young and as adults, like how that affected their relationship to money. And that's why I like to dig into people's money stories when I interview them. And I always preface it with, if there's anything you don't want to share, if there's ever a question that I ask that you don't want to answer, just tell me and we'll edit it out of the show. And that has happened several times. Like people have been like, you know what, I'm not really comfortable talking about this. And so we move on. But then there are people who are really good at being vulnerable and saying, you know what, I'm fine talking about this. And I'm thinking of Alan's Alan's episode. And I'm sorry, Alan, I cannot remember the number of your episode, but he and I talked for almost 3 hours. His is probably some of the longest episodes. It's a two-parter. And he went very deep into his family dynamics about money. And it was very helpful because I think people could really see the parallels between the way he was raised with money, the way his family was with money, and how how he handled money as an adult. And sharing that kind of thing is really scary. I understand, especially if maybe some of your family are listening to the show, but it can also help you even draw parallels to your own money behaviors now as an adult. I remember somebody mentioning, I wish I remembered the episode. There's been so many episodes that I'm sorry I can't remember them all, but I remember somebody saying, this feels like a therapy session, but not in a bad way. She said it in a laughing way. And she was like, I really appreciate it because now I can draw parallels. It's really cool. So it was really enjoyable to hear that. I can't remember if that was a she or a he. It might have been several people who've said it, but I enjoy digging deep on money. Like I said, for lesson number 2, FI is deeper than money. And I want to go deeper with the people who come on the show because maybe somebody's background that doesn't fit the standard FI mold will draw somebody into this community who didn't think this was for them. Maybe they'll see themselves in that background. Maybe they'll see themselves in that person's story and want to learn more about FI. And then that puts them on the path to becoming financially independent and becoming because financial independence is so important. I'm stumbling here because It's like, well, why is becoming FI important? Well, it's important because it gives you so much power. And we, as the middle class who have to work for other people, and even if you have your own business, your clients are your boss, basically, right? People who don't just inherit money and don't just have trust funds we're living off of, which is fine if you do, but for most of us, we don't. We don't have that much power. The people we work for are the ones who have the power. And especially if you're in corporate, man, those corporations have a freak ton of power. They have a lot of power. And this just gives you a little bit more of that back on your side of things. And I just want everybody to have that, especially women, especially people of color. I want that for them so badly because they have not had it ever in the history of everything. So, anyway, that is why to me it's important to share all of these different backgrounds and to have a diverse set of guests on my show, which, by the way, I don't sit there and go searching for diverse people. They come to me most of the time. This is how diverse our community is. We have so many different types of people from all over the world. And it's so incredible. And I'm so excited that I get to bring those stories to the forefront and for you guys to hear. So, the sixth and final lesson is I still believe sharing personal numbers is not helpful, but sharing personal stories is helpful. So, I've had people ask me before, like, I really wish shows would share numbers. I can't get enough contacts if I don't have the numbers. Well, I'm going to push back on that. I don't think that's true because when somebody shares their numbers, you don't know necessarily all of the context behind it. You don't know the education this person has. You don't know necessarily what kind of career this person has. Not everybody on my shows talks about their career because sometimes they can't, especially the high earners who are like lawyers and things like that. They can't always share that they are lawyers. People who live in high cost of living cities, a lot of people don't want to share exactly where they live either. So if I'm sitting here asking people to share their numbers in every single episode and you don't have all the context and somebody says, "Well, I make $500,000 a year and I found it very hard to save," you're going to judge that person, right? Or you're going to feel bad about yourself for not making $500,000 a year. Or if somebody says my net worth is $10 million, you're also going to feel bad about yourself. So that's going to push people away from the movement. I don't want to do that. I want people to come into the movement. And so if people want to share their numbers on the show, that's totally fine. I will not stop them. I have actually noticed that more people who have lower net worths are more willing to share because I think they see it as, hey, you person listening to this, person who's not sure about this FI movement thing, person who has maybe zero or negative net worth. Look, I don't have that high of a net worth, and this is how long it took me to get here. And it sped up so much because of FI and all of the actions that I took once I found FI. That's what happened to me. In 2017, I had a negative net worth of over $80,000. Now my net worth is almost $600,000 and it's 2026. So that's 9 years. Now, part of that was getting married and I doubled my net worth by just getting married. But that is something that can give people hope, and that's not a huge number, 600,000. I think that's like a $700,000 growth over 9 years. That seems like a lot, but if you take out the getting married part, let's say it's 450,000. Let's have it a little bit. $450,000 net worth growth in almost a 10-year period. That's pretty doable for most people. I wasn't making a whole lot of money. In 2017 was when I quit my job in New York City in art history and galleries and started down the tech route. So I was unemployed for a very long time taking a coding boot camp. I made in my first job $15 an hour as an intern. It was full time, sure, but I was scrambling to make ends meet. My paychecks were like $700. They were not very much. And then my income went up as I proved myself, as I worked harder, as I moved jobs. That is definitely something that in my story is what increased my net worth. substantially, besides getting married, was moving jobs frequently. And not like every 6 months, but every couple of years. I never stayed in a job more than 3 years usually. And that really catapulted my salary. And also learning how to negotiate for what I was worth was very helpful as well. And so I think that's something that, sure, that could maybe help somebody by sharing that specific story about numbers. But I think generally speaking, sharing numbers isn't always going to be helpful unless you want to go into the entire story of how you got to that net worth, which is not some of the questions that I ask on the show. I just think it's going to make people not want to join the FI movement. So basically, the conclusion of all these lessons for me is that doing Everyday FI, creating these episodes, interviewing these people, it creates connection. It brings more people to the community with relatable stories. It shows people that they can do this with an everyday job and lifestyle, and they don't have to create some sort of big famous blog like Mr. Money Mustache. They don't have to have the top podcast in the space like Choose FI. They don't have to write a bestseller like JL Collins. They don't have to do any of that to reach financial independence. They can just work their regular everyday job that they love. They can put money away, whether it's 20%, 50%, 60%, 90%, whatever you can do. And they can still live the life they want to live now and not have to cut, and they can reach financial independence. And, maybe that's a little later than 30, which is what the early FI movement kept touting is, oh, I quit my job in my 30s. Maybe it's now in your 40s. Maybe it's in your early 50s, but it's still earlier than 65, 70. Some people are working into their 70s. You're going to be able to become work optional much earlier. And so you can make the decision to, hey, I'm going to actually step away from this really toxic, horrible career for a while, take time to myself, travel, focus on my health, focus on something, a passion project that I want to do, maybe even focus on starting a small business, something that brings you joy, and all because of the power of FI. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about how the podcast is going to change. So I have been doing a setup where I do an interview, where I interview somebody in the community. Oftentimes those interviews have been going 2 hours or more, and so I've been splitting them up. I have since started to cut down on the interviewing because I think it's a little bit more enjoyable for myself and the guest if the interview is a little shorter. Really long interviews are hard to sustain and they get a little bit overwhelming for myself and others. And so I am going to be cutting them down a little bit. I am no longer going to be splitting up the episodes. I'm going to be putting them all out at once. And some of them, I have quite a bit of a backlog right now. And so I only just started cutting down on the recording time recently. And so my backlog still has some longer episodes, but I'm going to be putting them all out at in the same episode. I'm not going to be splitting it up anymore. And I'm only going to be doing one interview episode a month rather than every other Monday, or it's usually, if it's into two, I'll do one Monday and then another Monday for the second part 2. And then I will bookend it with a Megan's Money Musings or a Mitch and Meg's Money Musings. And so I'm going to be doing the interview once a month, all at once, one episode. I'm going to be doing a musings episode once a month and then a bonus episode once a month. So just 3 episodes a month now. And I might even cut that down a little bit. The bonus episodes, by the way, are only accessible if you're an EverydayFI Plus member. If you want to check that out, you can go to patreon.com/EverydayFI podcast and sign up for the EverydayFI Plus subscription. There's also just an ad-free subscription if you'd like to listen without having to deal with the ads, listening to somebody sell you, I don't know, gambling or Walmart stuff. Or I even had somebody tell me that ice advertised on my show, which really made me mad. I actually wrote a very strongly worded letter to Libsyn about that. I was like, absolutely not, and never again, do not allow that. But that's the trouble, is I do not get to choose the ads. I'm not to a listener volume yet where I can choose an advertiser and do a read ad or something, unfortunately. So I have to do the dynamic ads, which I don't get to choose. And so I wanted to offer a version for you guys to listen ad free. So that is a potential, but you won't get access to the bonus episodes. That is only for the EverydayFI Plus. And for EverydayFI Plus, you get ad free and bonus. So basically, I'm going to be cutting down on the amount of content so that I can focus on making the content really great. Focus on these bonus episodes. I want them to be meaningful and worth the $6 a month, $5.99 a month that you pay in the subscription. And so I'm going to be doing a lot of research. I'm going to be bringing on experts to do some research with me. David Robinson has been one of the experts who has come on, and he will be the next bonus episode that's coming out on April 6th, I believe. And it's something that I want to bring value to you if you are paying for a subscription. So that is how it's going to change. I will also be taking a Red X month. I am not sure when that's going to be yet. It's probably going to be June like it was last year. And so for this month, well, hold on, we're in March now. It might be sooner than that. It might be May. I'm not sure yet, but I will let you know. Don't worry. I'm not just going to go offline and not come back and you don't know what's happening. But there will be one Red X month that's coming up. It's either going to be May or June, and I will be back after that. And so, yeah, I am so happy that you guys are listening and that you get value out of the show and that you're regular subscribers. And I hope some of you are people that I've interviewed. And if you are, I'm so happy that I got to talk to you. And if you're not somebody that I got to interview yet, what are you waiting for? Sign up. There's a link in the show notes to sign up to be on the show. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe and leave a quick rating. Also, hit up my Patreon at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast for ad-free and bonus content. I'm Meghan Combs, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Fi.